program, sir.
Right on. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Sobriety date's April 8, 1989. It's not my first introduction to the Fellowship of AA, but it was my first introduction to the program. I have a lot of fun in AA, but I take this very serious, right? Because, tonight, not all of you, but some of you, your life may depend on what you hear and where you go from here, right? When you think of the purpose of a roundup, it's kind of interesting, but I wanted to say thank you to the committee. What a great job, right? People who love AA, that's who shows up, right? Really. And Rio, what a great job today. The presentation was absolutely awesome. And you don't understand that kind of commitment till your life has been altered and saved. And I don't mean in the evangelical way either. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but when you have a different experience than the life you were living before you got this thing, and the people around you are experiencing something different, like the kids that are here and all, the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys are in for a real treat tonight. I got an amazing story, right? You may think that's funny, but it's true. I'm totally blown away with my story, right? Why is that? Because I have the story of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have what's available here, and I've experienced something beyond anything I could ever imagine. When you really stop to think about this, 65 years ago, there was a room full of people dedicated of the idea of making this a place for other people who are working on membership. There are people right now working on membership to Alcoholics Anonymous that don't even know they're coming. Right? And what we're doing is making a place, because we are Alcoholics Anonymous. There's no yesterday, there's no tomorrow, there's what we do today, and we are responsible for the lineage and keeping this thing together. So that report was actually awesome, an amount of people that spend endless amounts of hours, and they don't get paid for it. What? Yeah, they don't get paid the time and energy they spent. And Joanne, what a great job last night for a woman in her mental condition. That was absolutely, that was mind-boggling, right? And there's one thing when you're kind of going through this and they tell you you're the most important person, and some of you still think that, but it's kind of like when you actually experience this thing to the degree that you start seeing it in other people. When you start experiencing this as a witness to what's happening here, it's pretty remarkable, right? And when you see the renewed families and friends, you see the people that come in here that were total write-offs, right? And they have no idea on the level of damage that they're dealing with, right? Like, come on. We don't judge, we're just reporting the facts, right? And you ever see some people how many people come into a meeting and you think you're doing great? Second day here, how are you? Fantastic, you're still smoking, right? Putting out the flames. But if you asked everybody around you, would it be the same story? Your representation of your story, is it the same as everybody's experience? And that's the interesting part, right? So before we get here, how many people spent time praying for us, worried about us, the anxiety, the phone calls? Anybody have that experience here? And we think, I'm not hurting anybody. No, just everybody, right? Nobody, right? And it's kind of like people start fearing for our sanity and start kind of wondering why we're doing what we're doing. And we may be drunk in some sordid places, wondering how we got there, and we come to, and we're really not. But the people who love us are wondering, where's my son, where's my daughter, where's my husband, where's my wife, where are my kids? Right? When you start getting it from that aspect, when anybody ever been to a funeral here or a eulogy of people that didn't get this thing? Do yourself a favor. Next time when you think you got it going on, go to one of those eulogies. Listen to the family. Listen to those people, and it's pretty remarkable. It's life-changing what you see here, because what's happening is these people are hoping and trusting us with their most precious commodity. They're trusting us that what what will return is a better product than what got here, right? And that's why we read how it works. It's not so much for the new person. When we read it, it was more for the person that's been around here to remind us what this is about. Remember, these people don't know what they're dealing with. They have no idea of what's plaguing them. Of course they feel like they're going to be okay, surrounded by people, come to a meeting and get the hope here and all that stuff. It's a nice feeling. Anybody remember that? You wonder what the hell everybody's laughing at and why are you smiling at me all the time for? Because they kind of know that we have no idea what's about to happen for those of us who are willing to go through a course of action to create this change. And what's really remarkable to this thing is that it's available to everybody, right? But what happens is if we don't do our primary purpose within the fellowship of AA, there's actually people dying of alcoholism in AA. Is that kind of mind-boggling? That there's people in our fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous dying of alcoholism. And they have no idea they're dying of alcoholism. Right? This is going to get heavy. We're going to get good. Okay. No, it's getting hot in here. So, and I could run better in case a lynch mob forms. Okay. So my story is my story. So, you can get upset with my story, but it's pointless. I'm not changing my story, right? It's kind of my story. So lineage, where I come from a long line of, I shouldn't be standing here by any means known to us. I've been told that by professional people from the people I come from and their stories. And I'm not going to get into their stories, but I'm a product of their environment. And I was raised in the streets of Toronto, and I've had many near-death experiences before even getting introduced to my story of alcoholism, right, through the hands of other people. So I come from a long line of trauma, serious trauma, right? And that doesn't make me an alcoholic. I used to think it made me an alcoholic. If you had my story, and how it works, it says there are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, right? And Chuck, my sponsor, used to go at the other end of the room, wherever I was sitting, he'd go 1, 2, Tom Hare was the other guy, and he'd point to us, there are those two who suffer from it. The great thing today is that I no longer suffer from it. I enjoy a lot of the mental health I've been left with. It's pretty good. Cheese and cracker on the same plate, things are good. But when I got here, so I can't tell you about my first drink. I was still in my diapers, right? Party, found a bottle, drank. Everybody thought it was funny. Grew up around alcohol. That doesn't make me an alcoholic. My sister grew up around alcohol. My brothers grew up with cousins, the same kind of atmosphere, but they kind of recreated their lives, and I kept on going this way. And it's not the first drink that I had that made me alcoholic. Somewhere along the line, there was a shift, a noticeable shift in my thinking that wasn't there the prior experience with drinking. And so when I found out about alcoholism and the characteristics of that, it was, and I'll kind of backtrack, but they talk about this allergy that makes us different than other people, this thirst. And the first time I experienced the idea of the second drink before I was finished the first drink. I've never had those before, but this one particular time I was in a foster care, I got out of a controlled environment, and I think I was 12 or 13 and a half, and I was having a beer, and the one guy didn't like the beer, and all I knew was I wanted his beer too. Right? And all of a sudden I became more concerned with the next drink before I was finished the first drink. Am I in the right room? Yeah. That's the start of alcoholism, is this thirst, right? And then the first time I experienced, I got a buzz, kind of like nothing, life-changing, but when I actually felt the life-changing experience of a drink, I think I was 15, and I was sitting outside my place, and these older kids came up, and they started harassing me and my friend. They were like 18 and 19, I'm 15. And I remember feeling socially awkward. And they were bugging me and my girlfriend, and I remember starting to feel resentment, internal conflict. And I remember feeling embarrassed. And as they left and I felt humiliated, I remember going to my friend's place. We were doing restaurant taverns, but that's another thing. Insurance, that's a whole different story. So I went to his place because I had a 40-ouncer there. I used to leave booze at different places. I went there, and I remember having a big glass of rum. And as I was drinking the rum, I started experiencing the promises. I comprehended the word serenity, and I knew peace. Fear left. I intuitively knew how to handle situations that used to baffle me. I was no longer 2'3". I'm going to go because I don't want to offend anybody. Well, I'm 5'5". So very sensitive times nowadays in the world. And I'm totally politically incorrect, and I'm not running for any kind of politician. So, pray for me, I get better. So I'm having a second glass. And man, I felt bulletproof. And I remember going to where these guys were, and I went right through the front door. I said, both of you are right now outside. And I cleaned both of their clocks, one right after another. I'm not getting into the whole history of my life, but I was pretty efficient at that age to look after myself and defend myself. The first thing my parents taught me was how to make a fist before junior kindergarten. I learned how to make a fist before I learned how to talk. And my parents, alcoholics and all that, the lifestyle, they were getting me ready for the world. How many people kind of have come from drinking environments? So we don't go with what you tell us, we go with what we see. How to conduct ourselves, how to read situations before they happen, who's who in the zoo, anybody? We kind of learn these survival techniques at a very young age. And kids know, like, you watch kids in these homes, they'll be drawing, and they'll pretend like they're not paying attention to you. But based on how you conduct yourself, whether they go hide in their room or they keep drawing. You could be throwing glass, you could be doing all that stuff. Well, once the energy shifts, they shift and hightail it into safety. It was kind of weird, right, that you'd be able to be comfortable in that environment. So I'll give you a rough idea. So when this happened with this drink, it kind of changed my world. And then I started getting into other stuff without getting into the whole thing, because that's really secondary, right? My story where I come and all that other stuff. But I used to help people find things, and I'd get rid of things for people, and I'd be transactional, right? So it was kind of like the stock market, but not really. It was kind of like I help people get rid of their money, and I gave money to other people. So anyways, and I'd relocate some things from one area to another area, right? And sometimes I would actually see what those things were. Interesting. So I'm on a 4-day run. And my cousin, the guys who are partying with, what they used to like to do was, before the party started, was to see how long it took me before I passed out. And I'd wake up on the floor with all adults around me, and they'd be doing super tokes up my nose and laughing. Get up, you young pup. This was 15, 14, right? So my first involuntary injection, for those that notice what that is, was a skin pop in my cheek. They're sitting and they were flagging on the couch, and they wanted to see how good the product was, and they jabbed me with it, and they hit me up with it, and it lasted about 3 days. I was on a 3-day run. And so what happened with this, the psycho and all that other stuff, so I found myself on the 18th story of a balcony, looking over the balcony, contemplating my life. And I thought, if the rest of my life is going to be like this, it's not worth it. And I was thinking about jumping. I don't know if anybody's ever thought about offering themselves here, but man, what a state to be in at 15 years old, to think, if the rest of my life is like this, without getting into everything, just that mental state of coming to that place of, my God, right? And so I was looking over the balcony, and there was a smith right there, and I was thinking, God, it would really hurt if I landed half and half. I'm having this conversation with myself, right? And then I went to my own funeral. That's always good. Anybody been to their own funeral, right? And I'm thinking, all these people, oh, I'm so sad. Oh, he was such. And I'm like, I'm lying in the casket, like I'm loaded 3 days on the balcony, thinking what my funeral would look like. It's looking great. Then my aunt goes by. I know he was no good. And I'm thinking this in my head. And I'm getting mad at her. I knew he was going to do that. I said, I'll show you. Nothing's happening. I'm standing on the balcony. this whole thing transpired, and I went from self-pity, incomprehensible demoralization, I'm going to kill myself, to I'll show you. All within a 15-minute period. Anybody? Am I right? And then, but the funny thing is, if you were to ask me, how you doing? I'll just get some fresh air. Just kind of. So what's really interesting about that is it set a train of circumstances, unforeseen circumstances in motion. Anybody ever read Bill's story here? What's really remarkable about Bill's story is the second time in treatment, he got to this place where he was in, I believe he was in communication with something greater than ourselves, where we get to that place of incomprehensible demoralization, that our ticket is punched and we know it's over. There's that moment of desperateness that happens within inside that I believe sends off a beacon signal to the universe. And somewhere, somehow, somebody gets the call to answer your situation. In Bill's life, what that looked like was shortly afterwards, Abby phoned Bill, which is interesting with a solution, and it started him on an unforeseen, like Bill had no idea what was about to happen to him when it happened to him. Does that kind of make sense? So when I was on that balcony, and that conversation with the universe, what it set in motion was unforeseen situations that worked toward me standing here today. And what it was it was on my 16th birthday. And I'm drinking Boilermakers. I know nobody's ever heard of them here. And I'm indulging these little purple things. You know, they used to look like gun caps. Two of them, one's good, but two of them, whole different experience, right? And I'm smoking Thai stick for those that, and I'm doing some tea. I am sailing. Huge. Like I'm just that. Most people work on their attitude. I worked on altitude, right? And I'm just kind of like, wow, is this actually happening? You know, when you look in the mirror, it's like, whoa. Like, alone on that one? Okay. So I'm indulging in dry goods to enhance my experience of the alcohol. And so the phone rings, and this guy says, hey, I'm looking for Tony Roberts. Is he there? And I said, buddy, the phone book's full of people like that. What do you want? I just found out what my name was because I was living under an alias. The reason I found out what my name was because I had to go get my social insurance number through my school. Right, so I found out my actual last name. It's really, really one of those stories. If you want to know, I'll let you know later. So this guy says he was my dad. And so what I found out later, but I didn't know then, was my mom left my dad in the hospital with 2 broken ankles. He trained with George Savello and those guys. He was a tough individual. His parents left him off, his mother left him off the reserve, left him at the bootleggers. That she was 14 when she had him and left him because she didn't want to lose her status. So he grew up resentful at the whole world. These people took him in. Their last name was Roberts. He got adopted in there. And so my dad's story was horrific, clubhouses, and he was one of the, probably, my mom said, one of the most dangerous men she ever met. And my sister just died, and what he ended up doing in the blackout was he put me in the hospital at 3 months old, in a blackout. Caused a rupture, and see, I was black and blue as I was in shock from head to my toe. And so I didn't know that at the time, so my mom, to save my life and her life, and left him. Any domestic, right? The things that happen to things in blackouts and stuff like that. A lot of people doing time right now that have no idea what they did. So what happens is this guy said he was my dad. And I was and he says, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm 4 years sober. I'd like to meet up with you and your mom. I'd like to make amends. I don't know what none of that means. All I know is finally I have somebody who's my dad, and he's going to be my protector. I heard all his stories. I just wanted to be like him. I just did that whole man thing, right? There's that whole thing, that what I used to think was a man. And I remember my mom came home, and I said, hey, this guy called. She said, he's my dad. She says, we're moving, right? That was it, right? So what he ended up doing, we met him, and I went to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And at 16, I sat in that meeting, and I had, for the first time, the hope that my life could look different. And that came from in here. It didn't come from up here. And I can't remember anything much about the meeting, but I sat in the midst of a lot of people whose lives were different. And then I started thinking, you know, when they read how it works, I'm wondering how it works. And so I started interpreting all these suggestions, right? So everybody said God was the answer. May you find him now. Makes sense, right? So step 2 is the quest for God, isn't it? It isn't. I didn't know that, because the people who were inadvertently ignoring me, trying not to help me, and kind of judging me, was kind of, not that that happens in AA, right? So I went on the quest to find God. I joined the Baptist church, and it was good. Like, I recreated my life. I was going to college. I went to Conestoga College. I'm getting a certificate in construction, blueprint reading, design, and all. I'm doing really good. I'm in the choir. Like, I sound like Mr. Bean, but yeah, I'm telling you, I had to get my hair cut. My hair was like this, shoulder wide. I used to walk back and forth. I used to hide joints in it, but that's another thing. So I'm coming from that. I remember 1978 people, right? And I'm hanging out with the people left over from the 60s that don't know the 60s are over. Right there. Free love, baby. So that's a whole different story. Oh, my God. Remember coming to, oh, no, that's not worth saying here. Okay. In a waterbed. Anybody remember waterbeds? I think I was 14. There's like 15 of us in there, right? And there's a bucket in the middle of the bed. And you wake up and you got that heating, that, you know, the water heating, and it's dry. You know, the dry. And everybody's been puking in that bucket all night, and you wake up and you got that filth. Anybody? And all you hear is, don't shake the bed. Because the bucket. So we're trying to get out of the bed. Anyways, that was a fun night. Anyways, I don't know how I ended up there. I think I did leave with my own clothes. Okay. Another story. So anyways, I'm recreating my life. I'm doing great, right? I'm in Bible study. I'm talking about my relationship with God. They drive me down to New York because they want me to go to maybe a Bible college and look at, you know, being doctrine into this faith. And there was a girl in there doing the same thing. She was I didn't know that, but she was in the choir. She was in there trying to change her life, to look for God and find this experience that allowed her to have a different life. She phoned my friend's place looking for me. My friend said, he's here. I get on the phone, and I could tell by her voice she was drinking. I could tell there was something, but something inside of me got excited. Anybody? And she says, yeah, Tony, I really like to meet up with you. And I said, me too. Not out loud, because my Christian friend was right there, right? And I said, I'll be right there. Where are you? Right? Put the Bible, I'll be right there, right? And so my friend goes, and this is the clique that they talk about, right? This malady, this clique. And I said, he goes, I'll go with you. I said, no, I better go alone. Right? So this was Sunday. I'm in choir that morning. Wednesday, we're both in an abandoned car in a field. I'm drinking. I don't know how I got from there to there. And I'm looking at her, and I said, what are you doing? She's huffing on a glue bag. She goes, you want something? I'm drinking it. I said, wow, that's disgusting, right? And I'm thinking, how am I going to introduce you to my mom? This is a girl of my dream. And that lasted a while until she got arrested, and then that was the last time I seen her, but that's another story. So, and then I come back to AA, right? And then, like, I'm trying to figure out why I did this. Well, it was all her fault, of course, right? I got triggered. Anyways, I was an opportunist. So then I met well-intended people. So then they said, well, you got to find God. So, okay, that's the wrong church, obviously. So I went evangelical. Oh, yeah, come on. Some of you tried it, right? And then I got drunk again. That was the wrong church. So these old-timers are trying to deal with me, and they're trying to figure me out. I'm trying to figure me out. And a lot of times is spent with a drink in my hand wondering what the hell is going on with my life. Anybody? And I'm trying to tie an excuse to it. Oh, look at where I come from, my life. Look at my parents. Oh, my God, and on and on and on. So this guy goes, well, you know what your problem is. And I said, no, I don't. He says, you lack discipline. Well, that makes sense. I look at my life. I look at what's happening. I look at the atmosphere I was raised in and the environment and all that. I lack this. So I remember sitting there with a drink in my hand thinking, where would a guy get discipline? I've done all of the martial arts there is. I've done boxing. I've done everything to get this. I'm disciplined in the arts. But what the hell? I thought, I'll join the army. I wish somebody would have walked up and slapped me right behind the head and went like a neon thing and gave me a side slap, right? So I go to join the army. So I go down to the boot camp, the office, the reserve office, is that what they call it? Recruiting office. I got an afro like this. I'm wearing leathers. I got my dad's biker boots. I got some gold happening. But I don't know that, right? I like to sign up. I hear this is a great idea. And the guy's just looking at me, right? He says, well, you qualify for all these different areas, right? I did this aptitude test, and he says, you qualify here. I said, no, I want to join the infantry. That's what men do, right? Another slap in the head. Anyways, I met a girl there who was doing the same thing. Funny how we meet people doing the same thing, right? These people we just happen to find. And so we went to the movie theater with a 26er. We shared it, and we confirmed our relationship. Then I found out what her last name was, but that's minor. Then we dated for a bit. She would come and meet me, and she says, hey, I'd like you to come out to my house and meet my parents. I said, okay. So where do you live? She lived in the suburbs. And so I went to consult with my friends, our friends, our lawyer friends, the people, dating friends, the people that know about life. So I'm sitting in the bar talking to these guys, drinking. I said, hey, she asked me to go to her place. What do I do? They said, well, what you got to do is bring a bottle of wine. Well, I'm a wine connoisseur. How many people didn't know that? Like, I'm specialized in wine. And I'll tell you how I specialize in wine. Maybe some of you do the same way. So I walk into the liquor store to buy a bottle of wine. So first you go by alcohol content, yes? There's 11 in the store. That's a good wine. Then you go by what's on sale, yes? And then, of course, volume, right? So I found this stuff. It looked so good. I never drank, but it looked good. It had a gold cap. People. Okay, so I'm in a liquor store. Okay, don't throw anything at me, okay?
I'm sitting here.
Told you I took off my jacket. I seen the look of some of you people looking at me, right? This is my story. Easy, people. Pray, leave, walk out. Anyway, so I'm in the liquor store, and I see this bottle. It's 1.5 liters. Baby duck. Huh? And the guy who invented that is an alcoholic. What makes me say that? It has the... You can put your finger in there, right? And and it has the gold cap. No cork. Wow. Right? And it has the non-slip lid. Remember the lip that fit? I'm having a proud moment. I'm thinking, these people, I'm going to meet her and her parents. They're going to be so happy on my wine selection. And so, without realizing it, my body knew I had an abnormal reaction to alcohol. It knew how much it would require, but mentally, if you asked me, I wouldn't be able to tell you why I wanted the 1.5 liter, because we're going drinking after, right? And so I was halfway to the till. My brain said, maybe other people want to drink. I went and got another 1.5 liter of wine. Think about that for a second. I got twins. Like, I'm thrilled to death with this, right? I get on my motorcycle. I got the 3 liters of wine in the inside of my jacket for safety. Not on the outside of my jacket or in the saddles. I got them inside with the 2 gold lids sticking up. And every time I look down, I get that cat-eating grin, right? It's like, yeah. So I knock on her door. I said, hey. She opens the door, and she looks at me, and she goes, she gets that blank look. Anybody ever have people look at you weird? And I'm thinking, what's the matter with you? She goes, you know we're going out later, right? I said, yeah, this is for dinner. So she wasn't as excited as I was excited. Anybody? I don't remember dinner. I don't remember her parents. I remember coming to in the bar meeting some of her friends. And this will give you a snapshot, right? And as I start drinking, I start rolling up my sleeves, right? So I'm 18, I got my sleeves up here, and that rodeo song's coming on. The first time I heard that rodeo song, so I'm about to fight one of her friends, right? And he goes, no, it's the song, the song, you know, is it, yeah, and they use derogatory. I thought he was talking to me. I said, who are you talking to, right? And so she goes, what's the matter with you? I said, you know, when I get like this, there's a couple things I like doing, right? So then I went into another blackout, and then I came to driving her car going down the highway. She's going, you're going too fast. I didn't even know I was driving. I came to and I looked at the speedometer, and it was like, I think I was clocking 120, 130. And I'm trying to figure out where I am. And thank God I went into another blackout. Then I came to in her bathroom, tossing my cookies up. And I'm thinking, my face on the porcelain. Any porcelain huggers here? And I'm looking and I'm thinking, what made me sick was the grenadine from all the zombies I was drinking. Not the 3 liters of wine I was doing and then the other stuff. It was, and I got into a fight, so I ended up on the plane the next day. I had a bit of a black eye, and I'm still smelling like the night before. You know, like Joanna was saying, the contents in my hair from the, you know, whoa, you know, when people, whoa. So I'm sitting on the plane between these 2 people. What I understand now is a lieutenant and a captain. And they said, how you doing? I said, good. Black eye, smelling like the night before, afro like this, leather coat boots, and they're like, they sat me there on purpose, I think, right? And said, where are you going? I said, I think I'm going to go to this place. It's a boot camp. I think I'm going to this place. I'm going to do some training. I'm going to become a soldier. They said, oh, they're going to love you there. So I did, just before I left for Cyprus, I was drinking at that time to where I got to a place at 21. I got in there at 19, just 19, and I left at 21, and I'm having bleeding ulcers. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced that, but I know now that I need to get to that drink in the morning. If I have just 2 or 3 drinks, it'll take care of the burning. Anybody? And I'm starting to have black dots, which I understand is the beginning of seizures. But I don't know that. They're black dots with white circles around them. And I remember I was just almost in the bar, and I started getting sick, and what I was huffing up was blood. Right? My brain didn't say, hey, you're dying of alcoholism. My brain said, what did you eat the night before that caused this kind of reaction? So then I got out of the Army, long story short, for loading up an FNC-1 with blanks. Nobody found the humor in that because I had a couple of resentments at some of the guys that I believe were setting me up. You know, when they talk about the 4-step fancy, they're real. And I sat on the bed like that guy in that movie, waiting for, and these guys came in, and I started firing the weapon at them. Nobody's seen the humor in it, that it was blanks. And so I got an honorable discharge, and it was within a week. I'm not going to Germany? No, I'll see you later. So I left the Army, ended up back in Toronto, trying to get sober by abstaining, and then so I ended up in the Queensway Saturday night meeting, and then my home group there was 4 years as I started to digress in the fellowship of AA. And they would ask anybody coming back, and they would just look at me. Like it was just like, you know, it just became the running theme. Yeah, it's Tony, or I was still drunk. I'd come to in meetings with different things hanging out of my pockets, and a case of beer, and my dog, and the people I was hanging with. And so it got to a place where one of the things I was involved in got foreclosed with the group I was hanging out with, and the group I was hanging out with asked me to stop going to that facility because they said there was something the matter with me, both mentally and emotionally. So the club I was involved with, they said, maybe just don't come back here anymore while you're drinking. So now they don't even want me. right? And now I'm looking at penitentiary time. Now I'm vomiting green bile, and I can't get this thing. So I'm sitting there, everything's gone, and I'm sitting there on one of these milk cartons, those milk crates. I remember it was yellow, and I had my important stuff still. I had the scale, the stereo, and there was a phone that rang every once in a while. I don't know if it actually rang or it was happening, right? So I'd hear things happening when they weren't happening. I don't know anybody. So I was in the shower, and the phone was actually ringing this time. I went and answered it, and it was funny because I was thinking, I was praying to God in that moment that there's got to be something different for me. And my brother called me, who I haven't seen in 2 years at that time. He just happened to call me. He told me he was living in BC and that there was the life he was living here. So I had a couple people to get even with. And I left, ended up in BC. And what happened was I lived in Alcoholics Anonymous. So, you know, when you get new guys come to meetings, everybody, hey, would you like to come for coffee? Here's my number. That wasn't happening. So I went 6 months, ended up relapsing. And then I went 3 months, ended up relapsing. My last relapse, I did 360 meetings in 90 days. I was in 4 12 and 12 studies, and I wasn't getting invited anywhere. I was socially and mentally beyond recall. My cheese and crackers weren't even on the same plate. Like they want me to go for a psych assessment. I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things, and I'm bad. I'm getting a little jaundice. And I just turned 27 years old on April 6th. And I went to the meeting talking about what a great job I was doing keeping me sober based on the information. Why wasn't I, right? I'm unemployable, but I'm doing a great job. April 7th, I talked about what a great job I did April 6th. April 8th, I got a 3-month chip, and I was getting an Academy Award. Anybody? I'd like to thank me, and I'd like to thank me, and I'd like to thank me, and all the promises are coming true. Look at Brenda, look at Kim, right? Sorry, did I say that out loud? And just, anyways, I'm nuts. I'm 27 years old, right? I'm looking for a solution for me, right? I'm not fighting God. She'll do. Come on. Some of you, he said that out loud, right? I mean, right? Relationship, job, money, prestige, these are the things that make us feel better. Right? And I'm running out of time, so I got to get the relationships, or get the kids, get the house, get the family. Anybody? No, just me? So none of this is working. An hour later, I'm drinking. So what was happening back then, this may be hard to believe, but in 1987 and 88, there were no big book study workshops happening in Vancouver. They were all 12 and 12. Back to basics with Wally P. and Novelcos, which is, none of it's AA. Like, the 12 and 12 is, but it's not the program of recovery. It won't get a drunk of my type sober, right? Any alcoholic coming in AA has no business being in a 12 and 12 study till they've gone through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the design of it. Nobody told me that. I didn't know that. So this guy named George that I used to look at to feel better about me, he was German George, and he had psoriasis, and he would shake all the time. And I would say, if I ever got that bad, the other guy was lighting fires and trying to hold up his pants. He was like, if I ever got that bad. So these are the two guys looking at to feel better about me. Anybody ever do that here? Oh, if I ever get, and then you become the person everybody points at, you know, it's like, so I'm not getting invited anywhere. I'm a danger to myself and other people sober. I'm very volatile, right? My vocabulary is very limited. I'm a knuckle dragon Neanderthal. Meeting that when I got here, they would try to give me a greeter on the greeter. Hey, let's see if we can get them on the greeter. Do something. After 3 handshakes, to say, get him off the door. Get him. I don't like the way you shake my hand. You got a problem? Like that kind of, like nuts, right? Let's see if he gets set up the chairs. So they give me the chairs for a while. So George got 12-stepped into a big book study workshop within his home. So there was this guy named Machine Gun Jerry, Steve, and Rick. There was these 3 guys, and what they would do is they would go through the fellowship, and within 5 minutes, Machine Gun Jerry would vet you to see if you were of the type of alcoholic they were looking for. And they wouldn't ask your permission to start working with you. So they got a hold of George. So what Jerry would do, I don't know if anybody knew, he was like a gang with his hat, and he'd walk up, hey, how you doing? Little guy, right? He said he hung around with Capone, right? If I ever took a drink, I'd kill you all. Like one of those guys, right? Cheese and cracker on the same plate, but you think he's not. So he would vet you, ask you a couple questions, then he would look over at the other guy, give him the nod, that guy would start working with you. And then he'd move on to the other people, called the women dolls. Hey, doll, you got a group, you hooked up with the women, and then he'd go out into the next. And this is all he did. So George went through this, and he had a profound change. He had the same change that Bill had going through this process. Something changed within inside of him where he started thinking of other people that might benefit what was so freely given to him. They told him in order to secure your own sobriety, you had to find the sickest guy he knew. So he couldn't find him, so he started working with me. And he never asked my permission, right? And so George would come up, he says, how you doing? I said, good, fantastic, life's kind of trial, like nuts. And he says, that was a great talk. And he says, what does it mean? What do you mean, what does it mean? Weren't you listening? He says, I was listening. He says, what does it mean? I said, what do you mean, what does it mean? He says, what's an alcoholic? I told him my understanding of an alcoholic. He says, none of that makes you an alcoholic. He says it makes you an a-hole, but it doesn't make you an alcoholic. And the key part of that is he turned around and walked away. Guess who I thought about for the next 3 days? George has started to sponsor me without knowing he's sponsoring me. So I see him, I walk up to him, and he says, don't you feel better thinking about me for the last 3 days than thinking about you? I was giving you a break, and then he'd walk away again. And I think, George, I'm not liking George. And George, the first time he says, hey, we got this big book study workshop happening. It's on Tuesday nights. Why don't you come and join us? I said, no, that's my trap line. I mean, that's my home group. I can't go that night. I said, I've been working with a lot of people in that group, and I got a couple numbers, a couple potentials. That was my dating site. It was my home group. Oh, I'm alone, right? yeah, sure. So anyway, I won't tell you about that story. But so I ended up getting loaded, like I said. And then he said to me, he says, hey, you've been around a long time, eh? I said, yeah, I had all the sayings down, I had all the catchphrases, had all the bumper stickers. I could throw a slogan on a bumper sticker and everything. Page 449, now it's 417, acceptance, surrender, let it go. Did crap for me, but I didn't know that. It made me feel saying it, like soother sobriety it's called, right? Makes you feel good, but it does nothing for you, right? That's why they don't read it and how it works. If page 417 worked, they would change how it works, wouldn't they? They didn't change it for a reason. This is where I make friends. So George says, why don't you come and help us out? So I went to Chuck, who was teaching me the traditions at the time, and I said, hey, these guys want me to go help them go through the steps, because I'm running a 12 and 12 study, by the way. You'll see the irony in that later, helping these guys that are worse than me. Anyways, talking about Bill's experience, hoping it would be mine by not doing what he did to get it, right? And so I kind of, Chuck said, who are these guys? I said, it's, Machine Gun Jerry, Rick, Steve, and George. He says, I think it's a great idea that you go there to help them. So, which is really cool is I went to this door and I knocked on it, which was George's place. It was the first place I've been invited to in 2 years, outside of the fellowship of AA, right? And I knock on a door and his wife answers, who is an Al-Anon. Her eyes become huge when she sees me, because I was part of a home group at the Wellington Heights meeting in Burnaby, and they used to have the Al-Anon meeting there, and that would cause a disruption in the AA meeting, right? Get into misunderstandings that involve moving chairs where they're to relocate. And she came out one day, she goes, what are you guys doing? What do you mean what were we doing? Probably arguing over money or a woman or something, right? And she goes, what are you doing? She goes, you know we have an Al-Anon meeting happening over there? I said, well, what's that? She goes, 3 of you knew? We go, yeah. She goes, I don't got time to explain it 3 times, right? So, but to give you the rough, when I found out what Al-Anon was, the level of mental health, I used to go by there and they'd be having a meeting and I'd go, I just wanted to stop and say, you're welcome. Because I knew they were there because of us and they were having a new experience, so you're welcome. I'm glad we could be of service. And the looks on their face, and I'd win. I like the effect of So anyways, I don't know why I went there. So there's Judy, oh my God. And she knew her husband's life depended on this thing. So they invited me in their home, and they started taking me through. For the first time in 11 years, somebody introduced me to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous as laid out by the first 100 men and women in the first portion of our text, not the first 164 pages, the first portion. And as they started to take me through this, kicking and screaming for God in my mental condition, I conceded to what they were saying. I conceded that that this problem had me, I didn't have it. And when they talked about this solution, I conceded that maybe it might be possible for me because they were experiencing it. And I also seen that if I did what they did, I'd get what they got. I went through that course of action, and something profound started to happen around the fifth step. I was connected to something in a way that I had glimpses of it, I've had moments of it, I've had this thing, but now I had a connection with it. And I had the experience where it no longer needed to be explained to me. Before, it always needed to be explained. What do you mean? But once I experienced it, no further explanation was necessary. And I knew when I was in tune with it, and I knew when I wasn't. And so what they got me into right away was working with others in step 11 as soon as I finished my 5. I started working with other people. I started the Big Book Study Workshop in Burnaby. It was the BYOB meeting. And that meeting went for 9 years, every Friday night. With the cassettes and the Joe and Charlie, we went through that course of action. Then I went to Saskatoon, went there, and then I came back, and we started the one in Vancouver. It became one of the biggest Big Book Study workshops in Canada, right? And what's the amazing part of that is where people came there looking for hope. They knew they would find it in that situation, and people would get dropped off and that the fellowship didn't know what to do with. I won't tell you her name, but she's in one of the highest trusted positions in Alcoholics Anonymous, and when she got dropped off at our meeting, the other fellowship didn't know what to do with her. She came in with a black eye, she was in a sling, and she's tried many attempts at this thing. And they knew that if she just got through this process, that maybe there'd be a different story for her. And like myself, she went through the same course of action that was laid out by the first 100 men and women and started having a different experience. As I started to go through this, I started cleaning up my past, right? But step 11 was the keystone to this whole thing. Because as I started cleaning up my past, I didn't go it alone. And that's where you really see God show up. Right? Step 4 is an inkling that there's something by getting some relief from these resentments, fears, harms, and conducts, the ability to shut the noise off in the brain long enough to have enough to get you through the process. And then when you do the 5, it's kind of really remarkable what you get to experience that built on this kind of clean slate, the moment of a clean slate, and then the thinking takes over again. So as I did my 8s and 9s, I prayed for direction. And one of the first ones I took care of was the ones I said I'd never do. It was the one I was looking at penitentiary time. And so I couldn't, backing up. So I had to make amends to some family because I was cut off from my family because of things I won't get into it. And I had to take a bus from Vancouver to Quebec. And the members would say every bus stop where they do a transition of buses, ask if there's any friends of Bill W., right? That was before cell phones and all that stuff. So every time we stopped in there, they said, don't sit in the back of the bus, sit in the front of the bus. So I had the Grapevine, which is excellent on cassettes. Give you a rough idea. Headphones. I'm sitting in the front of the bus, and every station I asked, any friends of Bill W. And the guys who took me through this said there was a contract on page 63 between me and God. It says, if I'm willing to do these principles and be, he's the father, we're his children, or he's the agent, right? It talks about this thing. If I'm willing to perform his work well, he'll provide all that I need. These guys taught me that when they talked about their experience, I thought they were crazy. But they were the right kind of crazy, because the crazy I was experiencing was nowhere near as appealing as their kind of crazy. I knew they were crazy, but it was appealing crazy. I was aspiring or hoping to get to that level of crazy. Anybody? Their crazy looked appealing. I thought, man, I'd like to be crazy like that. Because the stories they were telling me seemed so far-fetched. And so I was on this bus, and the last part of the bus ride, and I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to God. I said, you said you'd look after me. That thing on page 63 that they told me was a contract between me and you, this is the way I talk to God. You're dropping the ball, pal. You're all that in a bag of chips. I'm not feeling it. I'm the only one that talks to God that way? Okay, you guys can't. So this lady beside me goes, "You okay?" And she gives me a nudge, and I take off my headphones, and I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's the last part of the trip, and I'm coming from Vancouver, and I'm in this thing where I got to kind of meet my family to make right with the things that I did, and I did some horrific things back in the day, and I got a lot of anxiety." She goes, "Oh, yeah, me too. I had to do that." She says, "I'm a friend of Alcoholics Anonymous for the last 20 years. My response wasn't, "Oh, wow." I looked at, "Oh, funny guy, ha, ha, ha," right? And that's kind of like what this whole thing is about, is to start seeing what we're unable to see. A lot of times we go, let's invite God into this situation. But really the truth is, let's acknowledge God's already here. It's my unacknowledgement or my disconnection to it that has me having a different experience. The moment I said, "Show me," or "Where are you?" He says, "I'm right here in this person." And that blew me away. Out of the whole bus, that's what I remember the most, was out of every word, she sat right there. And God says, "I kind of got you even though you can't see it." If you take the time to just see what's happening around you, you'll realize that we've had you all along. Like when I was a part of that Queensway group, one of the most profound experiences I had in that Queensway group was this guy. He got a one-year cake, and he was a Golden Gloves boxer, and this guy beside me says, "Oh, you don't want to mess with him." Every time I seen him, guess what I was thinking? "Think you're a tough guy?" He's smiling at me, I'm smiling at him. "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm thinking, I'm going to take the street to you. The guy never did nothing. My brain has me, like I'm a prisoner to my own mind. And so this one time I was trying to read the traditions, and it impacted me on a level that I wasn't able to see before. But the impact of that was my girlfriend at the time was still out using and dying. And I was sitting there trying to have a different experience, and I had an anxiety attack for the first time, and I left the meeting, and I was hyperventilating out of the meeting. There was like 200 people at this meeting, and I felt this arm around me sitting on a staircase trying to catch my breath, and I was losing it, right? And he says, "That's okay, man, we got you." Out of the 200 people in that meeting, who do you think it was sitting beside me? It was that guy. And it was the first time I felt a guy's arm around me, and I was okay with the idea of that. And it gave me a comfort realizing that it is going to be okay in that moment, even though it didn't change my life, but it gave me something that happened again inside that kind of was profound. And so as I started going through my nines, life started to change in a way that I started to look at what God was presenting instead of what I was looking for. And my sponsor taught me it's about praying about things and not for things. The shift in whatever you have in line for me, allow me to be of service wherever I am. So when I turned myself in Toronto, and they wouldn't give me bail on some of the charges, they'd give me bail on the other charges. And what I started doing is 12-stepping people within the jail. I said, "If this is your will for me, help me be of service here." In this jail, in the Don jail, which was, without getting into it, and on one side was where all the blacks were, and on the other side where all the whites were, and I sat right in the middle. And people were asking me, "What are you doing here? You're like a bright light bulb in this place." I said, "I'm here talking to you." And I'd be talking to these guys without hope, without direction. I would be talking to them about my experience, and they got a bit of hope, and they said, "We're going to follow this thing." And so as things started to go through this, the miracle that I've experienced is the only limitation to this whole thing has always been me. That God's prepared to give me far more than I'm willing to receive. And whatever you want to call it, this power. And so I believe it's okay to call God on stuff. You all that? Show me. You got a problem? Say, "Show me." But be prepared for what you're about to get. Like, put your seatbelt on. Because God showed me stuff in ways that just blow my mind. So I ended up, John Howard Society gave me bail. And I had to sign in once a week. I wasn't allowed to leave the province. And the guy seen enough change in me compared to my story. He kind of went, he says, "You can leave and just phone back once a month and come back for trial." And I got this lawyer that if I would have, this guy gave me this lawyer who went on to be the Crown prosecutor, right? That if I would have went a day early, I would have missed him. If I would have went a day late, I would have missed him. I just happened to run into him at that moment, and he gave me his card. I crossed paths with him. He talked to the judge, he talked to the situation, the Charter of Rights and all that stuff, and all the gang division and drug division was there to give testimony why I shouldn't be on the streets. And he says, hurry up, come in. He says, just plead guilty. I went, I'm guilty. So all charges were dropped. The only thing that happened was a failure to appear. And this is his exact words. You must be kissing angels. So what's really remarkable about that is the people in Alcoholics Anonymous said, the reason you're having a hard time with this is because your perception of the situation is skewed. And we agnostics, they talk about being willing to look at things at a entirely different angle. What I was looking at was this power I was standing before was greater than the power I serve. And these people said, these people are accountable to this power whether they know it or not. That you serve something greater than anything you'll ever stand before. And I left there, and what was remarkable was my daughter at the time came and seen me that I was separated from. And I sat with my mom. For the first time in my entire life, I had a compassionate moment with my mom. It was the first time I touched her arm during dinner. And I felt compassion toward my mom. And I'm not going to get into the whole story, but it's I could be doing life in the penitentiary right now for the level of resentment I had toward these people and the thinking of the things I was thinking about to make right. That's the way I was always raised. It's about making right. Once you make right, then you both can carry on. What's really cool about my life is I get to see people like Joanne, Miracles of Mental Health, that wanted nothing to do with me, but I made it my lifelong errand that if she was in a meeting, that was consent to start working with her. And I started working with her. She went through the 5, and as soon as she'd done the 5, I said, good, you come and help me. She said, I don't know what I'm doing. I said, they don't know that. And I sat her down with a bunch of women, and she got busy, and that's what we do. That meeting, it's changed. It's just absolutely beyond comprehension to watch people like us do what we do now. Is that not the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous? Are you not amazed with your own story? If you're not amazed yet, then that's what the promises say. You'll be amazed, not somewhat thrilled. Oh, I'm so happy to be sober. Good, inform your face. But I mean, to be thrilled, like to be amazed. Come on, it takes a lot to amaze people like us, right? Other people go, oh my God, we go, right? For you to be amazed that what you're experiencing is what's available here. And how do we get that? The recipe's in here. If you can't show me what you've done, then you haven't done it. When they say get in the middle of AA, they're not talking about a meeting. They're talking about this. This is AA. The whole thing's built on this. If you're not in this, FYI, you're not in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Right? And if you're not carrying this message, you're carrying your message, right? And so when this is passed on, it's our responsibility to pass this on and make sure it's here for those who are coming. And Roundups is a kind of revisiting those who are standing up and those who didn't stand up. I have my buddy here, 58 years sober. I won't mention him. So that whatever your conviction is, like you have this lineage, 65 years. When you think about it, where would you be tonight if somebody wasn't responsible to ensure Alcoholics Anonymous was here? Where would you be right now? How many people would be alive? When you think about that sense of urgency, this sense of responsibility, the sense of all the people that put this together, it's amazing. But what's more amazing is this relationship that's available that you get to experience. That girl in the town, one day sober, what awaits you if you're willing to do something different that makes entirely no sense. If you're doing things that make sense to you, it's not working. Right? This made no sense to me. Well, you do this and you get this and this happens, you people crazy? Okay, I'll do it. I'm crazy too. So I'm watching the time here. I got a couple of minutes. And I want to talk about profound stories that blew my mind that I experienced. That lady on the bus. That trial, that's a couple things. I was involved in a relationship in AA with a woman who wasn't in AA, and we had a child together, and there was some stuff going on, and she took my daughter, and she went back to without getting into stuff. She went back to a place that I couldn't go get her. The law couldn't reach her where she was. And I wanted to be a part of my daughter's life. I was sober and all that other stuff. So my sponsor said, have you prayed about it? Did you give it to the Creator? Did you give it to God? Did you give it to the source? And I said, no. So every time I'd have those feelings of missing her and the anguish of what happened, I would say, God, I know you have a plan. And when you're ready to have her back in my life, I'll be ready to receive her. But you have this. And that prayer, I did that prayer for 2 years. Every time this came up, like the pause, what they say in step 11, ask for guidance. Then I'd go find people to work with. So this one day, I'm in Burnaby on Hastings, and I'm going to Metrotown. So it says, go to Metro. I hate malls. I hate big groups. So I'll go to Metrotown. I'm going to go buy something. So I'm just about at Metrotown. I start getting this, I call it a spiritual speed wobble, where I can't think straight. Something is like being overly hungry, but it's happening in here. And I just don't know why, but something said, go back home and go to sleep. So I said, okay, I'm going back home, go to sleep. I'm going to start over again. So I go down this 4-lane road that I've never been down before. 2 lanes coming this way, 2 lanes going that way, quite busy. And as I turn the corner and come past through the lights, there's this little blonde kid standing at the crosswalk in her diaper. She's done. No parents, nobody around, nothing. I pull over and I said, hey, I phoned the police. I said to the kid, get away from the, and she smiles at me. Weirdo, right? So I'm talking to the police, hey, there's this kid unattended in her diaper. She's not of the age of talking, but she can walk and there's something. She's just wearing a diaper. And she goes to the laneway, she looks at me and she smiles, starts walking down the laneway. I'm talking to the police, and it's from here to the back room. That's a long distance for this kid to be unsupervised at the crosswalk, standing there, waiting. So the police are en route. She gets to the fence. She stops, she hangs onto the fence, she smiles at me. She walks through the backyard, she goes up the stairs into the house. The people come out of the house, which is my daughter's mother, her sister, and her grandmother, come walking out of the house. That was my niece. That was my daughter's cousin, which is 5 years younger than my daughter. The cop comes up. Do you know these people? Yes. What are you doing here? See, I was praying. And they took my daughter away from me 5 years ago. I've been looking for her. And that little blonde kid there was standing on the corner waiting for me, because God instructed her that I'd be coming by soon and that I'd be seeing her. And she would say, hey, follow me, by smiling. Oh, about time you got here, by smiling. Right? And she led me to this house, and that's my daughter's family coming out of there. And I had no idea they were here. Don't move. Right? How mind-boggling is that? Right? And hand to God, that's a true story. So what's the limitation we place on this thing? We've been rocketed into the 4th dimension. The only limitation to this thing is my thinking around it. Imagine that we've entered this spiritual path sufficient enough to create a psychic change within our own being, sufficient enough for us to recover from this. Rearrange your thinking to a point where you could recover from this and have an experience beyond anything you could ever imagine. What limitation would there be to this? So my last story, I got thought, but my last story is another one of those. Anybody ever question God here? Well, we're all friends. I know some of you are going to stop talking to me any minute now, but so I'm my youngest daughter, Tears, and we're at the Avril Lavigne concert. I got box seats for her favorite artist. She's 9 years old. She's 25 now, I'll give you a rough idea. And she's got the posters, she got the glow things, and I'm having a proud moment looking at my daughter enjoy herself in total safety and comfort. In total safety and comfort. Not a care in the world. I reach in my pocket, and I realize I'm a loony short for the transit for both of us. I got credit cards, I got a bank card and all, but in my pocket, I'm a loony short. And a part of me went, I wonder if God looks after all my needs. And then I laughed at that thought. Anybody ever have that? Oh, it's a loony. I wonder if God looks after all my needs. You know, the narrator, right? And the other part said, right? Laughed at what a stupid idea that God's going to provide you with a loony for the, like anybody, like I just discredit God's ability to help me out, right? So I'm looking on the ground for a loony. Okay, you answering your prayer? No, I didn't even do that. I just left it out, didn't even think about it. But that's not the point. My point was that I had a moment of questioning God, whether everything that happens in my life is of importance. Well, if I'm willing to trust God or ask for these things, will they be available to me? Does that kind of make sense? And so if you've ever been to GM, it's as wide as this, and I'm standing where I'm supposed to meet my friends. I'm standing there with my daughter, and over where that cart is, the pull thing is phones, right? This lady starts from over there. I don't see her. She has her hand in the air, like this, and she's homed in on me in the middle of the crowd. The crowd's going this way. She's homed in on me. She could have asked anybody between all those. She went through all those people. She goes, "Excuse me, sir. Do you have a loony for this toonie?" I said, "What did you say? Do you have a loony for this?" My daughter goes, "Yeah, Dad, yeah." She's all excited about it. How mind-boggling is that? And the recipe to that experience is found in the first portion of this book. May you live long and prosperous, and may the force be with you. Thank you so much.